Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for inviting me back for a second year in a row. Mustn't have been too bad the first time around. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am coming from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to particularly extend my gratitude and welcome to people with vision impairment or other disabilities who are either online or in person with you today. I'd also like to offer a bit of an audio description of myself for those who are vision impaired. I have dark brown shoulder length hair. I'm wearing a black and red sort of floral patterned top, and I am sitting on a sort of rolly chair in my parents' study at the moment. So there's a bit of a sort of horizontal blind behind me covering a window to make sure we've got some decent light in here. I guess, as Mike said, a lot of people sort of already know a little bit about my story, so I won't harp on, I guess, too much about that. I guess I'll kind of gloss over a little bit, and I really want to focus on, I guess, as Mike said, the latest chapter of my little story and the fact that I am now a mum. So really my story begins, I guess, when I was 6 months old and I lost my vision. So I had retinal detachments, and it was really as a result of blood vessels bursting. There's no real reason for why that happened. We really don't have an understanding of how or why, and I was really under the care of some fantastic ophthalmologists, some which have been on the panels here today, who have taken over from previous ophthalmologists that I've had, but also just, you know, there was nothing that was able to be done to salvage my sight. So that's my first sort of disability, and not that there's a rank, but I do have a second one, and it's a neurological condition which affects the sensitivity and the muscle tone and balance in my arms, legs, hands, and feet. And that is a neurological condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. So that essentially means that I don't have enough feeling in my fingertips to be able to read Braille, for example. So that other disability was discovered when I was about 9 or 10 years of age. And really, I struggled quite a lot early on at school because I wasn't able to read. And it wasn't until down the track when I had that diagnosis and we then started working on some different methods of educating me at schools, things like audiobooks, electronic text, you know, using screen reading programs like JAWS rather than relying on Braille. And I guess that was where things really started to turn around on their head. You know, at first I was really struggling at school, and then all of a sudden, once I had access to these new technologies that were appropriate for me and my needs, I really did start to progress in leaps and bounds, and did end up being the dux of my school in year 12 and going on to do a journalism degree at the University of Technology, Sydney. So at university, I obviously had access to lots of different supports. There was a mix of the student services department providing things like note takers in class, electronic texts for all the sort of textbooks that were handed out to other students or purchased. And then also just making sure that I had access to all the sort of O&M instructors and people who would show me how to get to the university on the train. I had an hour's trip into the university campus, how to get around the campus, and then also just day-to-day getting around and you know, both either working at Vision Australia part-time and then going to uni, but then also doing unpaid internships in journalism. So I did them across all different types of media, magazines, radio, television. I was basically going in and working for free, doing anything and everything from making coffee right through to, you know, things like cleaning the fashion cupboard, and then finally getting to write and publish my own work in these major publications. But I essentially knew that that was going to be the only way that I got a job in the media. It wasn't going to be because I had a piece of paper from a university degree or anything like that. It was showing my dedication and that I had skills. I did face a lot of discrimination when looking for work. It was months of being knocked back because of my disability and not because of anything else, which was really heartbreaking at the time. But I was incredibly lucky that when I applied for the ABC, they saw that I had potential, and there was never a question of how I could do my job. It was, what can we provide so you can do it to the best of your ability, and that we can have the same expectations of you as we do for every other journalist. And I beat thousands of people to get one of those cadet traineeships. So there were 10 of them in my year across the country. So that was pretty special. I spent the first year in the Sydney newsroom, then moved off to work as a regional reporter in Bega on the New South Wales far south coast, right on the border with Victoria, where I lived independently, didn't know anyone when I moved there. There was no public transport. It was sort of, when I look back, the ultimate life experience, really, having to just start from scratch in a sense, not having anybody familiar around. But it's where I had, I guess, the best and most enriching work experience at the ABC, but then also where I met my husband, which is obviously, it's now a very special place for me and my family. So I then came back to work at Triple J, and it was there that I read news for the first time, reading news to more than 2 million young people in any given day. And that was a huge honor to do that. And I was the first person to do that blind, live to air across the world, as far as we can tell. If there was another person, I'm sure they'd reach out. So I'm going to claim that little piece of fame for myself. The way I read the news was essentially having the screen reading program JAWS loaded onto my laptop in front of me in the studio, and I had headphones on, and I would listen to the stories, so listening to JAWS read those stories, and I would have those headphones on and I would repeat what I heard. And I also had other streams of audio coming into my ears. I had myself coming through the microphone. I had a clock telling me when to start and finish the bulletins, because they were very carefully timed. And I also had the little audio snippets that we play during the bulletins, the music, little grabs from the Prime Minister or whoever it might be. So there was a lot going on that was coming into my ears from an audio perspective, but you also had to have your hand on the arrow keys on the computer, navigating up and down the list of stories so I could read them. But I also was paneling the desk, so fading up and down, turning the microphone on and off, doing all of that sort of thing. So there was a lot going on in a 3-minute bulletin for Triple J. It was a job that I adored. It was a job that I dreamt about for a long time and was very lucky to get. But after 7.5 years, I felt like I wasn't being challenged anymore and I needed something new. And so that's when I actually approached the ABC board and managing director and pitched the idea of the National Disability Affairs round. And obviously in the back of my mind, I wanted them to say, yeah, sure, we love the idea and it can be you. But I went into this thinking, this is what Australia needs. There's no other role like it. People with disability don't have a person in the media that can support them to tell their own stories, because I was so sick and tired of reading stories about people with disability that didn't have people with lived experience in them. I was also really upset about the types of language that was being used in reference to us, and really the kind of narrative that I felt it reinforced. A lot of journalists really reinforce this idea that our lives were something to be pitied or to give inspiration to non-disabled people. And so I wanted to turn that on its head and say that, you know, we should be providing you with much more than teaching you to be resilient and overcome challenges. You should just also be interested in knowing how we live our lives. And so I've had that job for 2 years, and it has been an absolute dream come true, particularly for me to be able to go now and meet lecturers or people who used to tell me that I'd never be on television. Well, I've now been a television reporter, a national television reporter, for 2 years. And so that is you know, a bit of a badge of honor that I will never be, you know, sick and tired of wearing. But I am on maternity leave at the moment. I've been on maternity leave for 6 months and I've got another 6 months left. I've decided to take a whole sort of 12-month gap out of the workforce because I've had a little boy. His name is Lachlan, and we had him in February. And I guess when I start to think about the parenting journey, it actually started a long time before having Lachlan in February. I guess it started years ago when my husband and I sort of decided, yep, we definitely want children. And we started to talk about what sorts of challenges I might encounter. And we reached out to other parents who were vision impaired or had different disabilities to say, what are some of the roadblocks that you found? What do we need to consider? What equipment should we be using? What did you use? What worked? What didn't? And we very quickly discovered that there's nothing out there that really supports parents with disability of any kind. We really quickly realized that they all just had to figure it out on their own. And like us, they had also reached out to other people, and that was their greatest source of guidance and encouragement and support. So I think putting together the idea of my job as someone in the media, we decided to do a parenting series at the ABC last December. And it was an opportunity for me to reach out and meet new parents with disability and to show Australia through storytelling what kinds of lives they are leading and the families they're creating, and how our families are just as big and beautiful and dynamic as everyone else's, despite the fact that we might be doing things a little differently. And so that was a really exciting opportunity for me. We also reached out to lots of medical practitioners. I spoke to lots of fetal medical obstetricians and specialists to see what are the kinds of things I had to think about from, to be honest, less of a blind perspective, but more of a neurological condition perspective. So things like the fact that my balance was going to be off as I grew a pregnant belly, and my propensity to fall over as my belly got bigger, and all of those sorts of things, finding out what I needed to prepare for from that perspective. I worked with an exercise physiologist for 2 years to prepare my body so that I was safe and able to still mobilize and get around and carry a pregnancy safely for both myself and the baby. But those things were more from the perspective of my neurological condition, not so much from the blindness. In terms of the blindness, I met with occupational therapists and worked with them and learning how to change nappies, wrap baby, bath baby, how to set up the room, the kinds of equipment I would need to buy. And of course, there was nothing specific out there. We had to buy things and adapt them for me. Things like little squeaky shoes, talking thermometers, talking scales, all of those bits of equipment. That's really only been things that we've discovered by talking to other parents and talking to professionals. In terms of knowing whether my child would inherit my condition, it is a genetic condition. My brother also has it. And for us, it was going and saying to people like Robin Jamieson and other brilliant geneticists that we worked with, like Christy Jones, what are the chances here? Talk about, the genes that are involved. The reality is we don't know much about my condition at all. We don't know what causes it. We don't know what genes we'd be looking for. So although we did a little bit of testing many years ago, it's just been a case of us going, you know what, the chance is small, but for us, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It didn't matter to us because I've lived a brilliant life. And if our child has any disability of any kind, then they've got the best mum in me to be able to guide them through it, because I know the challenges that society and that non-disabled people throw at us, and I would be the best person to guide our children through that. So not a lot of testing, to be honest, went on before that. I realized when I got pregnant very quickly that the hospital system is not set up for mums with disability. There is not a step-by-step instruction manual for midwives and obstetricians. A lot of them had never worked with someone who was blind or had various, conditions before. To be honest, I actually think that was an amazing thing, because I could not have had a better experience. I was a public patient in a major public hospital, and I was assigned a high-risk midwife, and I saw her at every appointment. I had ultrasounds at every month because we just weren't sure, because of my neurological condition, whether I would be able to feel fetal movement. And so there were so many unknowns going into this for me, for the midwives, for the obstetricians. And really what was brilliant was that we worked collaboratively. They asked me so many questions at every point of the pregnancy. I asked them lots of questions. They were very honest with me about their lack of experience with disability. And I think because they were so honest about that, from the very beginning, I felt like I could be very honest with them about the things I was concerned about and also what I needed from them. So telling them things like, I know lots of parents with disability who have had a social worker turn up to their bedside once they've had their baby to assess their fitness to be a parent. And I pretty much went in on my first appointment and said to the midwife and obstetrician, there is to be no social worker that approaches my bedside when I have a baby. And if there is, the Human Rights Commission will know about it. And so it was being very, very assertive and very firm with what I wanted and didn't want, and teaching them what was appropriate and not appropriate. And I had the best experience. In a sense, the red carpet was almost rolled out, because they knew, well, the birthing classes aren't accessible. The videos that we show aren't even in English. They're all visual. So I had midwives who dropped videos off at my house so my husband and I could watch them together and he could describe everything. I think he's scarred by that for life. And there were also midwives who everything was on Zoom. And so they gave a special exemption for us to go in so that the midwives could actually run face-to-face hands-on classes with me to show me all the kinds of different things, products to use, how to bath baby, how to hold baby, how to carry baby, from the change table to the bath to make sure they're safe and I was comfortable, and all those things. And even just things like I had to have an emergency cesarean, but there was an opportunity to talk to all the staff beforehand. Each and every person in the theatre came out and introduced themselves, told me their role, where they were going to be, what they were going to be doing. They talked to me throughout the entire procedure, asked me what I could suggest to make it better for all of us. And it was actually the most beautiful experience I've ever had in a hospital setting, and one that just was not traumatic or scary in any way, shape or form. And there were lots of complications leading up to Lockie's birth. I had a bit of a scary period in the last kind of few days, but I never once felt like I was in the wrong place or panicked, because I had people who would do the most simplest things, like knock on the door and tell me who they were when they walked in. And I know all those sorts of things may seem very trivial and may seem like common sense things for people to do. But I think the vision impaired people in the room will understand that they're not common sense things, because not a lot of people treat us with that kind of respect and dignity and understanding. And so while I've had a lot of experience in the hospital system, this was well and truly above and beyond the best I ever could have imagined and have ever had. I won't go on any longer, except to tell you that motherhood for the first 6 months has been the best experience of my life. No day is ever the same. He teaches me something new every single day. And while there is no step-by-step manual or instruction guide, I feel like I'm sort of a very panicked person, I guess, stressed person in life, but in parenting, I'm not at all, because we're just sort of figuring things out together, and just taking it one day at a time. And I think when you go about things using that perspective, and knowing to ask for help as well, and just reaching out for all the different services and trying everything, not closing your mind off onto anything, it's just been the adventure of a lifetime. So I'll actually throw to you, because I think I'll let you ask questions, because you are the people who know what you want to know about, my journey or motherhood or Lockie. So feel free to ask questions.
Okay, here's our approach, everybody. Just as Naz has done a little shallow summary through the first 15 phases of her life, and then the deep dive is what it's all about, I think we take the same approach. So I'm going to ask one question about that early phase, and I'd welcome one question from the floor if someone wants to ask it. And then we're going to dig into the more intense journey, which is motherhood. So here's question number one to warm up the room. So pre-motherhood. And this goes on the theme of today. So high school, we've got kids, they're looking forward. High schoolers, their parents are looking forward to life after high school, whether at the beginning of high school or getting towards the scary end of high school. What are the things that you would advise that student to focus on so they're ready for out of high school life?
Out of high school. Oh, okay. So a couple of things. Firstly, you don't have to know what you want to do. I don't think. I think that's such a pie in the sky thing. Some kids know, and that's great. If you don't, that's also fine. Doing some work experience, I think, is really important. Knowing that it might mean doing some work for free. That's okay. There's lots of things you learn, and that is stuff that money can't buy you. So I would definitely recommend some sort of work experience or internships and those kinds of things. It's the only way you work out actually what you might like to do when you leave. Reaching out for careers guidance, I think, is really important. So whether there's a careers counselor at the school, going to lots of career info days, I think, is really important. Getting your cane skills or skills with your guide dog up and becoming independent. Mom and dad might be dropping you off, or grandparents at school. You do not want that to be happening at work or at university. They are not cool. You want to go off and do it yourself. So getting your independent kind of travel skills up, I think, is probably one of the most important things. And also just getting your confidence up in approaching new people. I think when we leave school, we've been in this bubble where we've got our friends that we've perhaps had from year 7, and it's kind of easy to make friends, new friends within a high school setting, because you're all kind of in classes together at lunchtime and playground and all that kind of thing. When you go out into the big wide world, it can become a little harder to find friends. I think knowing how to strike up a conversation with someone new that you might be sitting next to in a lecture theatre or in a classroom or at TAFE, knowing some, having the confidence to ask people questions or asking them for help, or saying, oh, hi, I'm blah, 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 and this is what I'm studying, or what are you doing? So I think the 3 things are really just independence, trying different things to work out what it is that you want, and also just becoming a bit more confident in your socialization, because that's how you make new friends. It's how you find out about new activities or being invited to new things. And I guess for me, being confident and making new friends and showing people that you're out there and you are friendly and approachable means that people, I guess, will feel less nervous about inviting you to something or talking to someone who's vision impaired, because lots of people haven't met people who are vision impaired before.
Awesome. Now, this is your one and only chance to ask a pre-motherhood question. Does anyone want to delve into the early years? Yes, Rosie. Oh, let's get a microphone in your way. Sorry. Should have been better pre-prepared here. Wow.
I've lost you guys. I can't.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, perfect. Great.
Confidence wise and like independence, how when you're going out and actually talking to people in different like environments, how much do you feel you tell people on being confident and showing that you have a vision impairment? And
yeah, that's a really good question. It's a hard one to answer. It's a really personal thing what you tell people, and I can't tell you what I would recommend. I can only tell you what I'm comfortable with telling people, and that is, I think it also matters a little bit about how visible your vision impairment is. Mine is particularly visible. People can see by looking at me that I have a vision impairment in the way my eyes move and look, but also because I have a cane, and often I might be holding somebody's elbow if I'm out with a group of people. So mine is very visible. So I do get a lot of very nosy strangers coming up on the train or in the middle of the street asking me, what happened to you? And all those sorts of things. And to be honest, to avoid going through, my whole life story, I kind of go, oh yeah, it's from birth, and then move on. Or if I think it is particularly rude and I'm on my way to somewhere and I'm in a rush, I will say, oh, that's a really personal question. I'm not comfortable to answer that. But I think if the context is right and you're in a group of, people at uni and you're all chit-chatting away and, people want to ask and all those sorts of things. I think I in the past have been quite comfortable to say, well, I'm vision impaired and this is how much I can see. And, I lost my vision when I was 6 months old and this is why and how, all those sorts of things. But I think it's context. And I guess it's really about how comfortable you feel as a person. I find that, and not that I feel an onus to make people feel comfortable, but I find that if I'm open with people, they are also open with me, and it does make them feel a little bit more comfortable. That is not a reason to divulge things about yourself. But for me personally, if the context is right and I feel like people are being respectful and asking just out of genuine curiosity and they want to know because they want to be knowledgeable, not just because they're being nosy Parkers, then I'm quite comfortable to do so. But if you're not comfortable and it's in a completely out there, left of field context with people you're not even in a conversation with, I would sort of tell them where to go, really. I think confidence comes with age and maturity, and the more people ask, the more people, you tell, you kind of get a bit of a story down pat, and you get better and quicker at it and more confident at it. I was definitely not as confident probably when I was your age, Rosie, as I am now. But all those things happen. But ultimately, the quick answer to your question is it is totally up to you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Awesome question. All right. Okay. Now, in a motherhood life, I'm going to ask the first question. Now, you mentioned yourself, and there's been a theme today that's come up a few times, which is kind of about your rights and how you deal with a system that may or may not respect or fulfill their promises to you.
Very boldly.
And I know you talked about something really sensitive, that, your whole birthing plan, the way you're going to be respected by, I suppose, do we call it the health system or the medical system?
Yes.
And your journey to get home with your baby. How do you have any comments to make around rights and how you get comfortable with knowing your rights and being able to express your rights and stand up for them?
Yeah, look, this sort of goes back to the answer that I gave to Rosie's question, in that I think you become better at advocating for your rights, obviously, once you know your rights, but B, as you get older and you mature and you have a bit more life experience. And also, rights are something I think of it like this. Anyone is entitled to respect and dignity and to be heard. Those are very basic rights. We're not talking about anything that costs money or that takes a lot of effort for people to give. They are very basic. They are the basic most principles and rights that someone deserves. And everybody deserves them. I don't care what disability you have, where you're from, what color your skin is. We all deserve that. And I think particularly for my pregnancy journey, having heard so many terrible stories, I already knew that I needed to have quite a thick skin going into this, and that I sort of thought to myself, well, if I'm in the media and I have a high profile, and if people treat me that way, how on earth are they treating people they don't see on television or read about in magazines? And I wanted to set an example so that the next time someone walks into a hospital with their husband, and this did happen, I walked in for an appointment at the hospital when I was very visibly pregnant, and the person behind the desk said to my husband, "What's her name? When's the baby due? What's her date of birth?" And my husband isn't used to all of these sorts of invasive questions. I am, because I've dealt with it for 34 years. He's only been with me for 10 years and is still very surprised and shocked and so angry when people do this sort of thing. And it happens very regularly to us. People have often said some, pretty interesting things like, who stays home with Lachlan and I while my husband's at work? Someone actually asked my husband, how do you feel being mother and father? Which was incredibly insulting, because that night I had been up every 2 hours and Tom had the most beautiful sleep he's ever had in his life. So all of these things happen very regularly, but Tom got incredibly angry when this person behind the desk at the hospital said that and said, well, my wife's right there and I'm not answering these questions and you should know better. But because I have, I guess, the profile I do and the confidence I do, I take it upon myself to teach people lessons because I want the next vision impaired person to walk into that hospital with their husband and a pregnant belly to not be treated that way. So it's I guess just come over time and with experience and having these ridiculous comments thrown at you, where you become quite thick-skinned and a bit intolerant sometimes, and also use it as a way to educate other people. But it happens over time, and you should know that you are to be treated with respect at every point in your life. And if you're not, then make it known that you demand it.
Yeah, there's a lot of nods in this room.
Sorry, I've got very long-winded answers to these questions.
Great, awesome. Okay, the question in this direction. Others, if you're going to have anyone else got a question, start, pulling on your.
Hi, my name is Matthew. I just had a question. So you've mentioned how people sort of respond to sort of your, the vision impairment, and I'm interested. Do you notice, having met lots of people from different cultures through your work, that different cultures respond differently? And do you have comments on sort of the general culture in Australia? And are there certain cultures that you feel sort of resonate more and sort of have a more sort of accepting or
that's an interesting question. I mean, having done a lot of work in different developing countries, people with disability generally are treated differently in various parts of the world based on different things, based on for economic reasons, for history reasons, for different belief systems, all those sorts of things. I find that generally I don't think it matters where people come from, and I think there's just a different maybe belief system in some cultures where it's sometimes seen as maybe a bit of a curse or something that's to be apologized for, I guess. I often have people come up to me and sort of say, I'm sorry that you're vision impaired, or we'll pray for you, those sorts of things. And I think you've got to be aware of the perspective that people are coming from. And also it's an age thing. Sometimes I find older people, they're a product of their era. They say things that are a little off, but you've got to put it into perspective and think it's a time and space that they grew up in. And I think what we have to do now is make sure as a society that we are not perpetuating stigma and negative perceptions. And I guess that's why I wanted to come up with something like the Disability Affairs Round, because a lot of the media coverage of disability was perpetuating those negative stereotypes that our lives are something to be pitied and feel sorry for. And that's just not the case. And so I wanted to provide this new fresh perspective where we could show people that actually we're not something to be feared or concerned about. So it's a hard one to answer, but I think you've just got to be mindful of when people do say things, the perspective they're coming from, and take it all with a bit of a grain of salt, and use it always as a gentle way of educating people.
So I've got an important question for you. Are you getting any sleep?
He sleeps quite well in the evenings, not much in the day. So look, he's okay in the evenings. And now that I said that, it'll probably all change. So
what's that here in the background?
Yeah, he was having a bit of a scream before. I've got someone trying to rock him to sleep, so we'll see how it goes.
Now, my conscience and my phone is telling me that we're about at the end of our time. Does anyone want a question in before we thank Naz and wrap up? Yes, we do. Hang on. Away to the back of the room.
Hi, Naz. My name's Ashley and I'm an avid Triple J listener. Just wanted to put that in there. My question was, when you were considering taking up journalism, was there anything in the back of your mind, as it is a job that includes quite a lot of travel, going to new environments? Did that ever make you nervous, and how did you manage moving around new environments and spaces that you might not be familiar with?
Yeah, look, it is a hard one. No, it didn't cross my mind. It probably should have, but I go into most things thinking, oh, we'll figure it out along the way. I quickly realized that being a reporter out on the road was going to be a little bit tricky. I needed, you know, some support from other journalists. I mean, that's where the confidence comes in. You know, I just made friends with journalists from other organizations, so that when we were all in a media pack at court or at Parliament House or wherever it is, or in the middle of a press conference in, you know, back of Whoop Whoop, you know, I had people to kind of go, you know, hey, my name's Naz from the ABC, you know, I'm vision impaired. Can I just grab an elbow and can I, you know, join you in the media throng, that kind of thing. It is tricky. It is really tricky. I became very good friends with, you know, court officers, so that I knew them all by name, and they often showed me, you know, on my days off, I'd go in and get them to show me around the court, so I knew where I was going. I would always just ask people for help. You know, I'd always say, I need to sit in the first chair near the door, near the, you know, in the court, so I could quickly run out and file and didn't have to kind of contend with, you know, walking over people's feet and all that kind of thing. It's about just thinking on your feet, and there are just some stories that I don't go out on. Floods and fires are a no-go for me. I can cover them, but from the office. And I guess, you know, doing a bit of day-to-day reporting, you know, you do rely on camera operators, sound operators, producers to sort of guide you around new spaces, drive you to places if it's a long distance and, you know, cabs aren't an option. I also rely on producers and camera operators to tell me what sorts of things we're filming. You know, I can give them a vague rundown of, these are the people I'm going to interview, these are the kinds of images I think we should capture of them. But ultimately, it's a trust game with me. I have to trust that the camera men and women are shooting what I want them to shoot, plus, you know, they're incredible professionals, so they shoot everything else that they think would be good for the story. And then I need to trust that the editors are putting the pieces together beautifully. When we put a piece together, my producer and I sit together and we go through the pictures, and she'll help pick what will work for the story and in what sequence. And then when the piece is edited, the editors and producers will sit down with me and talk me through the story frame by frame and tell me all the pictures. So it is not without its challenges, particularly television reporting, but we've made it work in a way that suits me, that suits the team. It is incredibly labor intensive, and it is very much a collaborative team effort. But I would argue that all good journos should be working with a team and collaboratively. We're in a day and age now where, you know, you rarely do things on your own. Of course, you need to be trained in sort of everything, but if you work in a team, that's where you get the best work.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. One last one, but don't ask one of those ones that's a treasure trove. Oh, wait. I made a promise for this question. It's Ingrid, and she is 11 years old, and she's doing a school project.
Hi, Ingrid.
How does it feel that you won't be able to see your son's face?
Oh, that's a really lovely question. Sometimes a little bit sad, particularly because everyone tells me he is a very, very smiley kid. He's got these big, beautiful cheeks that everyone tells me his cheeks have their own postcode. But, you know, I'm lucky that I get to feel his face instead, and feel his big cheeks. And I can sense when he's smiling. I can now hear him laughing. I can, I can feel when he's looking at me because of the way he sort of moves his arms and legs, and I can feel the direction of his face. I can also feel the direction of his breath when he's breathing. You know, he's looking directly at me. So sometimes I do get a little bit sad that I can't see his face and see what he looks like. But that's the reality of not having any vision. And, you know, that's okay. There's also some really awesome superpowers to having no vision as a parent. I am the only one that can go and check on him while he's asleep without waking him up. Everyone else needs a light or a torch to check whether he's actually asleep. I can just gently run my hand on the inside of the cot to feel whether he's, got his face pressed up against it. He wears a little sleep suit with a zip down the front. I can just gently run my hand across him to feel whether the zip is still facing up, so I know that he's lying on his back. And I've also found other ways, like leaning into the cot and listening to the way he's breathing. If it's a consistent sort of breath, how it normally is, then I know that he's totally fine. And the way he breathes when he's asleep is very different to the way he breathes when he's awake. So those are little sort of intuitive things that I have developed because I'm vision impaired, and many other parents don't have that ability. So there's also other things like I can't literally keep an eye on Lachlan when he's on the floor or playing or in his cot. So, I just run off to the bathroom, or, run off to quickly put something in the bin, and I've got to come back and pop on the floor with him. So I spend a lot of time with him. So as a result, he sees his dad and he smiles, but when he sees me, he's very excited because we're always on the floor playing together, because I have to have that tactile one-on-one sort of, I have to feel where he is. And so he knows my voice, he knows my touch, and he knows all of those other things. So those things outweigh not being able to see him. And that's a fantastic question, Ingrid.
Awesome. Now I'll get in trouble because this is the end, but it can't be a Pandora's box question, all right? Okay, so this is it, promise.
You've actually just answered my question, because I wanted to ask you what was the best part about being a parent with a vision impairment, and I think you've just answered it. So
yeah, look, there are so many things. There's those things I just mentioned, but there's also what's been really beautiful is that I have joined 2 mums groups. We go to music classes, we go to Gymbaroo, we go to our sensory play classes, we're about to start swimming classes. I have found not one person in any of those settings that has made me feel uncomfortable, that has seemingly felt uncomfortable to be around me. They have all learnt how to best support me. They ask really respectful questions because they want to learn about the way we do things. They've learnt a bit about kind of not sweating the big things as well from us, because I think they all worry about certain things and then they come and talk to us about how we do things. And I think they feel a little less pressure and all those sorts of things, just seeing us get around and do things. Because I can't use a pram because of, I need to use a cane as well. Many blind parents do use a pram, but because of my neurological condition, I've decided it's not a safe option for us. But that's meant that I've had to reach out to people and make new friends and have a nanny come and work with us to take us to activities once a week. It's meant that I've made all these new friends. Our house is never empty and therefore never clean because we've got tons of babies around on the floor, making it messy. But our house is never empty. It is just full of people and babies and laughter. And there's also other little things like just being adaptable and figuring out new ways to do things, and having lots of people involved in Lockie's life. I think because we are always surrounded by people, he is just such a social kid. We go to classes and he is the loudest and most out there baby. And I think as a result, he's just more vocal than other people as well, because I talk to him constantly because I have to compensate for not being able to make eye contact with him. So as a result, he's already sort of starting to make so much noise, and we go to things and other mums can't believe how loud and vocal he is in comparison to other children. So I actually think he'll start talking much earlier than he would if I wasn't blind. So for me, the benefits are actually endless. There's probably things that I haven't even realized yet in terms of benefits of being a mum with vision impairment.